All right, everybody. So this is going to be a separate episode that we're going to be covering week to week. The new Dexter, New Blood, right? Dexter, New Blood. Is that what it's called, Sona?
Yep.
Not First Blood. That's Rambo. But and this is, of course, a continuation of Dexter from its 8-series run back on Showtime again. And this episode is called A Beautiful Day. I don't think we have to break down this title too much, do we?
No, I don't think so.
So when we open up, there's a lot of needle drops in this episode. I didn't write all of them down, but we do open up with Iggy Pop singing Passenger. I am a passenger, which of course references his Dark Passenger.
Exactly.
So on the nose, the show is so subtle with all its references.
Yes.
The first thing I wanted to talk to you about before anything else is, what'd you think about the title sequence? We get this new title sequence, which seems to be like a flash forward of only this one episode. So I assume this will happen every episode. What do you think of this?
I was too busy being disappointed that I wasn't seeing something like the original title sequence, which I think is one of the most brilliant title sequences of all time. I really loved that, him making breakfast and all of the references to things that were not breakfast foods. So exactly. I was hoping for something else like that.
You're right. And this is very disappointing for me also. I agree. And not only that, we don't get this, we get these quick cuts, no music, no Dexter theme music. And I knew even from seeing it, because the scenes were so relatively mundane, that these were just scenes from the current episode. We literally see it, and I actually rewound it just so I could take notes really quickly. But we see a box of pastries. He buys pastries, a box of pastries. He buys pastries in the episode. And then we see some blood on the snow, which we see later in the episode. And then we see him dancing in a bar, which we see him happens in the episode. And then we just see hands. This is the only indication that there might be, maybe the blood drops as well. But then we see also someone's wrists being taut on a rope, which of course he will. Minor spoilers, everybody. He ends up killing somebody this episode. What a surprise. But anyway, so we just have these little flashes to the current episode. So I'm like, is this going to be what they're going to do? They're going to just give us little snippets of the current episode. This is not a good title sequence, I got to tell you.
Agree.
Yeah, and then we get into Iggy Pop, the passenger, of course, mentioning Dexter's Dark Passenger, which what he calls this, urge he has to kill in his mind. But we also noticed something interesting, that he has been stalking this white stag, I guess, for a long time, but he won't kill it. He won't even kill an animal, much less a person, supposedly. All right, so here's my first question for you. I did not rewatch the last season of Dexter. I refused to do that, but I did read some recaps. Okay. And it refreshed my memory. And basically, Dr. Vogel, I think was her name. She had been there at the beginning, and she reveals right before she gets murdered at the end of that season that basically Dexter wasn't a psychopath, that he didn't have to be a killer, and that this was devastating to him. He goes oh, you mean that's all this time I didn't have to be a killer? And so now supposedly he's cured, because apparently, even though you have this urge inside to murder, that when someone tells you, well, you know what, you don't have to have that urge if you don't want to. And he's just oh, yeah. I'm like, really? I don't think that's how psychology works. But
I actually remember none of that. However, I think it's clear to anyone who watched the show, Harry it didn't have to be this way, Harry, man.
Right. Oh, absolutely. That's for sure.
When you see that your small child has these unhealthy urges, the route that you take does not have to be, let me show you how to kill things in a way that is not going to keep you from functioning in normal society. There are other routes. And so to me, this was always a monster that Harry created that did not have to be.
I agree. Once again, this is just kind of the disastrous writing of that show beyond the 4th or 5th season, where you're basically saying, so he's not a sociopath after all. And I don't even want to get into it. It's just too convoluted. So the best thing to do is just kind of create a very vague recollection of the best parts of that show and move on from it. So yeah, I'm not going to delve into that in any more detail than we already have.
I mean, I will agree that it seems very unlikely it would be like flipping a switch when you have spent your entire life channeling those urges by killing people who quote unquote deserve it, to be able to then just one day decide you're going to stop.
And it's also kind of, in a way, I mean, this is kind of jumping ahead in the summary, but it almost is sad to have him kind of revert to his old ways so quickly in this episode, because we don't get to see him really weigh out this new version of Dexter that we see, because the show is trying so hard, at least for the first few minutes, to show how reformed he is. You know, you're explicitly seeing that he won't kill the stag. You're explicitly seeing that you know, he's like now cultivating, he's raising animals, he's growing crops. It's like all these like kind of metaphors for like cultivating something rather than killing it. So it's like the exact opposite in a lot of ways of some of the symbolism of that earlier show. But at the same time, I think to myself, as I'm watching all of this, that they're supposed to be showing how utterly reformed he is. It's a little suspicious that this is a place where you can walk around with knives, guns, axes, and be covered in blood, as it like you see people like casually gutting animals and stuff like that. And you could just kind of wave to your neighbor and be like, hey there, neighbor. So I'm like, a little suspicious, Dexter, that this is where you end up, where you could literally be caught in the woods, covered in blood, and someone wouldn't think it was out of the ordinary. A little, like little convenient way to kind of cover up your worst impulses, possibly. And then he sees a vision of Deb. He's no longer stalked by his dad. Not a step up, by the way. You know, his dad, that actor whose name I can't remember now, pretty interesting, especially in this role as this kind of ghost dad. But now he has ghost Deb instead, and not so great. And why is she in a bathrobe? Why is she always in a bathrobe, no matter what, under circumstances? She jumps out when she turns into a fish at one point. Fish Deb jumps out of the water in her bathrobe. Like, what is that?
I did not pick up on that, but yeah, I don't know. I am not interested in Deb. I never needed to see Deb again, so I don't care.
He and her were married for a short period of time while they were making the show. So I'm like, is this weird to suddenly have to act with your ex-wife?
Holy cow, I had forgotten about that.
Yeah. So I wonder if this is uncomfortable for them in any way. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe, you know, they might have had a good split, so it might not be.
Wow, I totally forgot about that.
And I think they were still acting together when the show was on the air after their divorce. So I guess that would have been even worse than now, right? So I guess it's I'm probably overthinking it. What else did I have as far as weird little asides?
His hair.
Oh my God, his hair, his bangs. Like, what is up with this? What happened to his hair? It might just be hat hair, you know, like everybody does have hat hair up there. Oh, that's the other thing I wanted to bring up. Every single synopsis, I literally don't know where this came from. Maybe they explicitly say it in the finale of the original recipe, Dexter. Everybody talked about how he had disappeared to Oregon. They're saying he's in Oregon, he's in Oregon, he's in Oregon. And I was pretty sure that he was in the Pacific Northwest as well. And every single recap I saw says he ends up in Oregon, but he's not in Oregon. He's in New York now. So how did this happen? I guess we'll find out, maybe.
Yeah, it's very annoying.
Yeah, no explanation, but I guess maybe they'll explain. And that's the other thing too, is I think he's been gone for more than 10 years, but he says he's been here in this upstate New York area for about 10 years. And then he also says to somebody he says to Deb, I guess, to Ghost Deb, that he hasn't killed in 10 years or almost 10 years. The question is, so he probably killed somebody out where he was, and then he migrated from there. And maybe we'll find out more. We'll see.
Right.
His name is Jim Lindsley, by the way. The author of these books is Jeff Lindsley. So definitely a call back to that.
Interesting.
Oh, and then of course it gets pulled over by Angela, Chief Bishop, and another fake out here. We're like, why is he hiding that? He's been sharpening this axe. Where's he taking it? Who's he going to go kill? Why is he hiding it? All of this is just foreplay, apparently. He's hooking up or dating, I guess, with Angela. And they end up, you know, having sex in the car. And this is where the bangs are most pronounced, by the way. This is when I actually wrote down that he has bangs, was during the sex scene. I'm like, you have a more unattractive hairdo. Yep, wouldn't she just like put her fingers through his hair or something? Be like, let me just fix this for you.
Yes,
I can't look at this. I can't look at this.
So yeah.
Oh boy.
She can do better.
And I'm reading my notes here. I said, Dexter has bangs. Soda's going to be mad.
I am mad, and I'm mad at that lady because, like, I mean, I know it's so limited there. Like, you know everybody, and everybody knows everybody, and I guess a new guy is exciting, but come on, you could do better. Maybe just like take a little drive out of town or something.
Yeah, exactly. There's got to be another bar, you know, next town.
Yeah.
And then we see a helicopter flying in. There's some rich folks who live up in the mountains, which, you know, is not uncommon, by the way. As soon as I see the helicopter come in, someone says, like, oh, they're flying in for the season. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's not going to come back. I'm sure we'll see what we actually already know some of these family members here, and I guess it'll get more so. And then turns out that he's working at what is it, like a hunting supply?
Yeah,
place,
like
right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I guess the owner or one of the other, I guess is the owner or one of the other salespeople is one of our friends. I should look up this actor's name, but he's also one of our friends from Only Murders in the Building just recently.
Yeah. I feel like he's maybe the manager or something.
Yeah. And he's talking about how his boyfriend wants to name the dog Garfield. Terrible name for a dog, by the way. So he's definitely in the right
Yes.
there. Oh, and then of course, while he's working there, we meet Matt Caldwell, major
Mm-hmm.
douchebag. This guy, like, as soon as I literally, I think we happened to end up watching this thing almost at the exact same time.
Yeah, I was like 2 or 3 minutes ahead of you, I think.
Minutes ahead, minutes of
Yeah.
difference. And I remember as soon as this guy comes out, I texted to him like, "This guy's not going to last long.
Yeah.
This guy is going to be dead by the end of the episode." And indeed he
Yep.
was. He's being stalked by someone. It's not much of a mystery here. It turns out to be Harrison, his son, who's
Right.
been run off to Central America somewhere with Hannah, and now has tracked him down somehow. I hope the show will explain how he tracked him down, like how,
Right.
Yeah.
Because by the end, if I remember correctly, everybody knew. Well, I guess maybe they all think he's dead. I don't know. All right. No, let's not waste time on it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can flesh that out in more detail later, because I assume there's
Yeah.
going to be more explanation to what's happening here. Because once again, going back to our text, we did all this via text already. Going back to that conversation we were having, literally said, I hope they don't drag this out, because the idea that either so that this kid could actually somehow have tracked down Dexter Morgan to here, like maybe he's sending postcards to Hannah or something, and he uses
Or
those
money.
postcards,
Yeah.
or money, or
Mhm.
whatever, like wire transfers, right? Exactly. And he tracks that down to this location, and then he meets this guy who, he was not 2 years old when Dexter left. He was, he would remember his father's face. This guy who's a spitting image of his dad, who is, living in this town where supposedly postcards or wire transfers or something are coming from. And even though all of that is happening, he would be like, nope, not me. And Harrison's
Yep.
like, oh, darn it, let me get back on the bus and go back
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
the Dominican Republic or wherever the hell I was before.
Mhm.
And luckily, they don't try to drag that stupid plot point out. They actually, he does show up at the bus stop and tell him, yes, I am Dexter, and I'm going to show you the murder ways.
Yes.
He's going to have a lot more than he bargained for, I think, Harrison, in this relationship.
Well, but Harrison's mom is a serial killer too, right?
True. Yeah, that's right.
So.
That's true. So
Runs the family.
Yeah, he's going to get poisoned or dismemberment, depends
Yeah.
on which side of the family you lean towards. So yeah, but I'm jumping way ahead there. So yeah, so we meet Matt. He's a jerk. He has a friend of his who he hangs out with. Matt wants to get the biggest gun he can to show off for his
Mhm.
gotta get the biggest gun. Turns out that he tries to buy this gun. He has a red flag raised on him. Dexter goes to this party where he's apparently been practicing his dancing for this very day. So he's got to
The line dancing. Yep.
he's got to practice so that he can pretend to be a good facsimile of a boyfriend at the square dance that night. While he's there, we find out that there is this young bartender who's like a college age student, I guess. And the other person we see here is another young girl that Angela, tries to help out. And I'm like, oh, this girl's not going to last long. She's the sacrificial lamb of the show. Although based on the trailer for next week, it looks like she's been abducted, of course, but at least she hasn't been murdered. Not yet, anyway. But there are a lot of missing girls in this area.
Yes.
And which once again goes back to the idea that if Dexter was still killing, that maybe he would have been lured to this area because of all these girl abductions. But now he's been there for 10 years, so he's done a terrible job of keeping this serial killer under control. Right. So it does look like there's girls disappearing, and this girl who we meet momentarily, and right away you just see she has like a halo over her head. You're like, oh boy, this girl's gonna be in for it. But yeah, so after that night, 24-hour hold is no longer on the gun. He shows up at this party. Turns out that the bartender girl looks like she's hooking up with this jerk. Having very athletic sex for a very long time during a protracted conversation in the bathroom. This is all happening like just to irritate them, or at least to irritate his friend Bill, aka Dickface. But the interesting thing here is that there's that whole story of that lawyer family down in South Carolina, and how the son may very well be a serial killer, allegedly. Just throw that out there. And that he, also killed, one of his girlfriends in a boating accident. So maybe Matt is an analog for that spoiled brat who may have killed a bunch of people. So that's like kind of, they're kind of using that ripped from the headline storyline. So then the next day, after he gives Matt his gun, he's out in the field. He finds his deer again. And, he's communing with this beautiful white deer. And of course, Matt goes and kills the deer.
Yeah, Matt's a better shot than I thought though, because he's, it's maybe 1 foot between the the deer and Dexter.
Yeah, and he even says it. He's like, "Oh man, I almost killed you, man."
Yes.
And Dexter does not like this, so he knocks him out, and then he's about to kill him right there at that moment. And he goes, "Nope, I got to do this the right way. Got to follow my rules."
Yep.
So
The return of the kill room.
Exactly. So he covers up the blood by diluting Matt's blood with the deer blood, and then taking Matt out to his kill room. So he's like resets up the kill room in his greenhouse.
Like riding a bike.
Yeah. And then he's like, he's back in it again. In case of emergency, break glass. He like breaks a little box with a piece of glass so he can get his slides. But then he decides he doesn't actually needs to keep mementos of the kills anymore.
The slides were like a main factor in his undoing last time, right?
Exactly. So maybe he's smart enough to get rid of that. Exactly. There is something that Matt says to him right before he kills him to try to change his mind.
Well, he blames his childhood trauma that he didn't.
Oh, yeah. It's the affluencia thing. He's like, oh, yeah, everybody.
He didn't have a good father figure or parental figures growing up, and all sorts of stuff that many of us can say we experienced, and we did not kill anybody.
And Dexter basically says like he's like basically past the point of no return. I mean, once you're on the kill floor, there's no, they're not really going to get released.
Yeah.
You know what? I thought this out again. I'm going to let you go. And Dexter does his usual thing, stabs him in the heart and dismembers him.
As you do.
And that's it. But he leaves some blood behind. We see at the final moments after he goes and picks up Harrison at the, he has to break a date with Angela, by the way, just so that he can dismember his new friend.
Mm-hmm.
And he does stop at the bus stop after disposing of the body to pick up Harrison. But we do see some blood spots.
Mm-hmm.
He's a little sloppy here. Like you said, he's a little out of practice. There are some pretty funny moments here. I like Deb jumping out of the, there's a dream sequence where Deb, she jumps out of the water like a giant fish that he's caught on the line. Mm-hmm. There's also the fact that Deb's always wearing PJs. I thought that was entertaining. Mm-hmm. I also like the fact that Deb is like saying like, you can't tell Harrison you're his dad. Think of all the people you've loved that have died. Dokes, really?
Yeah, I mean, Dokes there was a fondness, but I mean, I would hardly put them in the same category as Rita.
But I do love when she pulls the bullet out of herself and she goes, "Me? Remember this bullet, Dexter?"
Drama.
Yeah, it's a little silly. And that's pretty much where we set it up. I mean, the more interesting than this specific episode is the coming attractions, where we see that. Or do you want to take a guess? Let me hear your guess on what you think where the direction the show might go in from here.
I mean, I haven't given it too much thought, but I feel like he's going to be fighting those two sides of himself of like, no, I really am a murderer. No, you're really not. And what do I want to pass on to my son? Should I teach my son how to be a murderer? I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't. That might not be great. I feel like that's what we're going to go through. How about you?
Yeah, and I mean, yes, I agree that that's definitely going to be like the character arc for him. I totally. But I think like as far as plot goes, my guess is
like the girlfriend investigating his murder and him trying to cover it up and all of that.
Yeah, there's a little satire coming, or a little humor, I guess, in the next episode, in that we see that she's like, oh, we're going to have to set up camp, like our investigation camp in the woods because, it's close to the kill site. And we're going to do it out of your house. It's like, great, thanks a lot.
Right.
Right where you're going to find all the evidence. Terrific.
Exactly.
Coincidentally, hey, all the evidence points comes back to here. So that'll be interesting. We also see that Matt's dad, who is this rich guy who like knows everybody in town and can pay everybody off, is going to be aggressively, probably like looking for the killer as well. So Dexter's going to have to kind of cover his tracks there. My guess is that the dad will find out that Dexter's a killer and will still, rather than outing him to the cops, he's going to try to take things into his own hand, like vigilante wise. And I think that's going to be the face off between the two of them. And then, of course, who is abducting and killing these girls? I think Dexter's going to be trying to capture that person. And I'm sure those two storylines are going to intersect, whether it's the dad or whether it's Dickface himself. I have like I texted you at the end of the last episode, my money's on Dickface. So
yeah, okay.
But we will see.
Right.
But I don't think we've seen the last of Dickface. That's my opinion.
Fair enough.
All right. So to fill out the episode, I did want to continue our sociopath of the week conversation. So today, let's I'll talk about my experience of watching you and some realizations I had. I didn't like it. I'll just put that out there, but
I know.
I'm not going to bash, but I'm not going to bash the show. I think I had some interesting feedback, and actually ran it by Kim, who had seen the show as well. And, if I just really had nothing cogent to say, I probably would have just kind of said, okay, not for me. But Kim actually found it entertaining, my feedback about the show. So I figured maybe it'll be interesting to have a conversation about it.
Okay.
So let me start off with you and kind of these realizations I made while I had a tendency to overanalyze everything and my realizations as I'm watching the show. So the first realization I made was that this is the third time now, by the way, the third time where I think I probably set my expectations incorrectly, because I'm realizing it's probably because I'm not really a TV watcher in a way. Like I was someone who never really watched TV very much. I watched movies. Like if I had time to watch something, I'd watch a movie. And then what happened was that, in this like golden age of TV, The Sopranos and Mad Men and Breaking Bad, and I basically became more of a TV watcher because I'm like, oh, wow, the really good writing is actually happening in TV now, right? So it was a big shift, right? So I'm not used to, this kind of probably like TV type pacing. So the first thing is, you heard my conversation yet last week. I was thinking, oh, I'm thinking of The Talented Mr. Ripley. I'm thinking of all these other things. So once again, maybe setting my expectations improperly. But I also think, and here's where it goes back to being a TV watcher, I also think a lot of this is the execution of the show. I can feel, and I know it was a network show before it was on Netflix, I can feel, and you can even see it in the structure of the episode, where they have like these little cliffhangers, like during commercial breaks,
for the
right?
commercial. Yes.
Yeah. And it was just like, so I just really felt like, there was this artificial hook every 5 or 10 minutes, which made the episodes feel so long. And I'm going to be total transparency here. On Netflix, you can watch the shows at 1.5 speed. I was watching this at 1.5 speed, and I was at the pilot episode, and I told Kim, I'm like, I think this is like an extra long episode. I think I'm in episode 2, and I forgot the break. And I turned on the remote to see how far I was into it. And I was about 30 minutes into a 45-minute episode at 1.5 speed. And in my mind, I'm like, this has been on for over an hour, right?
Okay, so I am a TV watcher.
Yeah.
So that structure does not bother me, but I totally do understand what you're saying.
Yeah. And so once again, not even to be critical of this, because once again, this is network television, right? So I'm sure if I watched Lost back in the day on ABC. Right. I'm sure if I watch Lost now on Netflix, that I'll see all these weird breaks in there. And it's once again, just something I'm not acclimated to. And even with like prestige television, if you watch Breaking Bad, on Netflix, you don't feel the commercial breaks because they don't have those type of beats in the story. They don't even care. Like they don't even try to structure it that way, right? So once again, I think it's expectation, and it's about the execution of the show. But here's the last thing I'm going to say, and this is a matter of taste, so I can't say one thing or the other. I know you found the lead character, compelling. I found him very boring and much worse. I hate to say this, and I don't want to disparage the actors because it's a matter of taste. I found this girl that he's obsessing. Candace, is that her name? The girl he's
Beck.
obsessing. I'm sorry. Yeah, Beck, of course, Beck. Candace is his original girlfriend.
Right.
But Beck, I find her so not an interesting character, right? Like,
no, and I think that's part of what's funny about this.
Yes.
She's beautiful. Okay, so there's that. But I think part of what's funny is he just has like put her on this pedestal, and she's just a regular girl.
I find it so interesting that he's put her on this pedestal, and I honestly feel like there's nothing interesting about her.
It's brutally true. She's not even honest particularly like, she's not brilliant, right? Like they make that clear right up front. And he kind of like pegs her as a poser here and there, right?
Exactly.
If I'm remembering correctly, this is a few years back now for me, but I feel like that is part of his like psychosis or sociopathy or whatever, is that he just like builds this person up to be the perfect dream person when like they clearly are just a regular person.
And once again, this is me giving overreading the story, but I always think about like how I could potentially fix this. And by the way, when I say fix it, this show is obviously very, very popular. And most of the time, like when I say, like, for example, I was telling somebody, this is how I would fix the new Halloween movies, like my version of the Halloween movies that would work for me. My friend basically said no one would want to see that movie, and I'm like, I understand this. This probably would not be popular, right? But at the same time, like when I watch the show and my perspective on it, that's something actually interesting to explore, right? If we explore his psychology of like, why did he pick her and everything else. I mean, at one point the show like goes into her head, right? Like she starts narrating it, right? So now like she becomes like a POV character, and I'm like, I'm just not invested enough in these characters, any of them, to make this commitment, right? And then once again, going back to that TV watching part of it, it's very and maybe I'm misusing this because it's my own terminology, but it's very soap opera to me, in the fact that there's like and I made this comparison to Kim. It's like, you watch like a show like Breaking Bad, or even more so like Better Call Saul, which obviously are very different shows. I'm not trying to say every show should be Better Call Saul, but I feel like, you spend all this time with this character, you get incredibly vested in them, and then they just lie and you feel betrayed because you're so vested in it. And this is like the exact opposite experience, where it's like so much crazy stuff happens, but I don't really care that any of those things happen, because it's just another crazy thing that'll happen 10 minutes later, right? So it becomes like overwhelming things that happen, but I'm not emotionally vested in any of those things that just happen. And then it becomes repetitive because it's there's so much, right? It's like a deluge of more preposterous things happening. I think that is probably why there's such a big disconnect for me, is that, having that blank female character is probably intentional to some extent. And then, but me, on the other hand, I'm like, would I stalk this woman? No way. I'm just like,
not worth the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just like, I literally am like sitting there projecting myself into his perspective, and I'm not a big fan of his either. So, I mean, the character just doesn't work for me. But at the same time, I'm just sitting there going like, by episode 2, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start stalking the next girl who walks into the bookstore. This one's too much work for someone who's not.
Peaches, right? Peaches is more interesting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's better off. Yeah, he would be better off that. By the way,
not Peaches. Peach, right?
Right.
Sorry,
Peach.
it's several years ago. Peach.
No, that's good that you remembered. But I actually thought that early on when Peach shows up, I'm like, is this going to become a cat and mouse game between him and Peach? Where because they could almost be like, ooh, another sociopath, like this could be interesting, but that's not what the show's interested in, right? It's really about having this kind of almost a perverse romantic comedy, and that's the other thing that's interesting about it too. I could watch this show once again, the show that I would make that no one would watch, but I could watch this show. I would be much more interested in a version of a romantic comedy where we see them as like sociopaths who are trying to manipulate each other. And then it becomes like a metaphor for how we kind of all are like, in dating, are all like kind of projecting versions of yourselves and all kind of stalking each other and everything else. Like it would become like an interesting critique of the culture or something, right? But once again, I think the show's interested in that. I think the show is just trying to be very much what it is. And, you just spend the whole entire episode watching Beck go to like a Renaissance or whatever, like
that part was a little weird. Yeah,
just like, and I'm just like, I don't care. I don't care. And we meet her family, like I don't care about any of it. Like,
yeah. No, I mean, I get where you're coming from. I just thought it was super fun though. I really enjoyed it and continue to enjoy it.
Yeah, and you asked me like why I actually kept watching it. So I had the pilot was the worst for me, by the way. And then, but what I would say is the thing that kept me going, even though I really disliked the pilot strongly, I was really intrigued by the setup. I thought it was interesting. And then it's almost teasing that it's going to be a show I'll be interested in. And then like, for example, when he has the boyfriend locked up, and I thought that could be interesting where he could like keep him down there for a while. And it's preposterous that no one ever goes down in the basement, by the way, but he could have him locked up there for a while. And then this guy is basically training him. Like, let's use Dexter as an example. This would be someone where teaching Dexter how to be a ladies' man, right? Because he's such a sociopath that he's not, like he doesn't have those skills, right? So it would be interesting to have that dynamic. And I'm like, oh, maybe that's where the show's going. But nope, that's not where the show's going. And then we have another opportunity where, then we have, oh, maybe this can be a cat and mouse game between him and Peach. Nope, that's not what the show turns into. It really is about these people like potentially ending up together. And I'm like, really? Like, this is what it's about? And also just all the flip-flopping on the casting. Like, she's cheating with the psychotherapist.
Yes.
No, she's not cheating with the psychotherapist, but no, she really is cheating
Yes,
with the
she is.
psychotherapist. And then, like all of that, I'm just like, whoa, like, and like, once again, that would assume that I'm vested in that drama at all. And I'm not, like, at all. Like, so
Mhm.
I feel like the show, and maybe this is the final point I'll make on it, is I feel like the show is constantly focusing on the points of the plot that I'm not interested in. And I kind of like, every time I'm kind of like, oh, well, I'm intrigued by that. Another example of where I'm intrigued was when I stopped watching it was at the beginning of episode 4, when we are suddenly in her head. She is now narrating, right?
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh, is this going to turn into like a he said, she said version of the show? Like, now we're going to, like, he is projecting his fantasy onto her. And now we're going to see, no, well, this is her version of reality. And, she's going to get more complexity. And they like abandoned, not only they abandoned that in that episode, they abandoned her narration halfway into the episode. I'm like, so what was that? Like, I don't, I was very confused by a lot of things.
But did you notice her leather jacket though? Her suede jacket is really awesome.
I hadn't noticed the leather jacket, but it is pretty cool. I mean, in general, most of I think her outfits are pretty decent.
Yeah. So there's that.
Oh, and I wanted to pay you a compliment, by the way. Kim
Please
listened to the episode. She listened to the episode, last week's episode, that I had mentioned that she was kind of out on the show after season 2.
Yes.
She said that hearing your description of the show in general and for the current season actually reminded her why she liked the show, and she is now on board. She started watching season 3 last night. So your pitch worked for her for sure.
Well, I hope she doesn't have the same outcome it had with you.
Well, I'm pretty sure. I mean, if she made it through season 1 and season 2, I mean, obviously she loved season 1 to jump directly into season 2. Like, she binged season 1 and 2 almost back to back. So obviously she had a very different experience than I did, where I was like, oh my God, we're 2 hours into this. Wait, 25 minutes. Yeah, so that's where the fast forwarding started. I'm like, okay, we got to watch this at double speed.
Gotcha.